spider can. Spins a web any size, catches thieves just like flies. Look out, here comes the Spider-Man.
Spider-Man has always been hit or miss when it comes to video games. While we have gotten some standouts like Never Saw Spider-Man for the original PlayStation, and of course Spider-Man 2 for the PlayStation 2, more often than not we get something ranging from mediocre to laughably bad.
I'm going to die!
We haven't yet had that definitive Spider-Man game, one that perfectly captures the essence of the character, what people love about him, and appropriately translates that into the medium, in the same way Rocksteady's Batman games do with him, at least until now. Now before I get into it, full disclosure, I'm a huge Spider-Man fan. I still remember watching the original Sam Raimi film for the first time when I got it for Christmas on video. Up until that point I had no real interest in superheroes, but from start to finish I was glued to the TV in absolute awe, and from that point on I was hooked. So you can imagine my inner 8-year-old's reaction when watching Sony's E3 2016 conference when they announced Insomniac Games, developers of the first game I'd ever played and still my favourite game for the original PlayStation, Spyro, was developing a brand new Spider-Man game exclusively for the PlayStation 4. So I knew I was going to love this game. I mean, I love all Spider-Man games, even the bad ones. But I trusted that in the hands of such a talented developer that we were going to get something special, and we did.
So, why'd you call? Need a date to the policeman's ball?
You got a black and white suit?
Now in most Spider-Man games, the story is somewhat of an afterthought, just an excuse to give Spider-Man reasons to punch people. But here it's actually the focal point. The game begins with an epic showdown between Spidey, now 8 years into his career, and Wilson Fisk, the Kingpin. Fisk gets taken down, and this opens the opportunity for new players to step in. While Spider-Man takes up a majority of players' time, Peter is really the heart of the story. While he's comfortable in his red and blue tights, we see the toll it's taken on his personal life. Him and Mary Jane are broken up, he's getting evicted from his apartment, and he's consistently unreliable to both his mentor at work and Aunt May. It's a refreshing change from Spidey's previous games, a lot of which skip over Peter Parker completely. The quiet moments, with Peter walking around the flea shelter talking to people, or sitting down in a diner talking to Mary Jane, are just as interesting as the explosive action sequences.
As soon as he reads the article you're gonna write, guaranteed promotion.
One of the great things about the story taking place so late in Spidey's career is the sense of history we get between Spidey and his villains. You can tell from their back and forth that they've had past encounters. Spidey will often call them by their first name, or talk about the first time they met.
Herman! Long time no see!
This makes the world feel like a living, breathing place. The story is emotional, exciting, and at some points surprisingly dark. Combine this with the exceptional performances from Yuri Lowenthal, Laura Bailey, Mark Ralston, and the entire supporting cast, and we have a Spider-Man story that easily bests anything the movies have delivered so far.
Buddy, if I had a nickel for every don't move...
Go Web! Fly!
Even in the bad Spidey games, web swinging is always a blast, and I had no doubts Insomniac was going to nail this part. I can't even count the amount of times I would head towards an objective marker, only to realise minutes later that I'd swung past it, having been distracted by the joy of zipping from building to building. Spidey has several traversal moves, including point launches, where he'll zip to a point in his vicinity and spring off of it, to wall runs, to web zips, and training these moves together is the key to keeping your momentum. Easy to learn, but when you've mastered it, it's unlike anything you've played before. Combat is just as stylish and fun. You have several gadgets at your disposal that emphasise Peter's scientific wizardry. Web bombs, strip mines, drones, and of course the classic web shooters. Experimentation is encouraged, and finding the right combination of moves is immensely satisfying. There's definitely comparisons you can make to Arkham's combat, but once you get into it, its uniqueness shines through. The fighting in Arkham is mostly about swapping between punch and counter, with a little bit of gadgetry thrown in, but here there is no counter button. Instead you dodge out of the way. Mobility is definitely the focus, whether it's closing the distance by zipping over to an enemy, or jumping in the air and yanking them up to you. All of this combined makes for a system that feels distinctly made for Spidey. Presentation-wise, the game is nothing short of breathtaking. There's a level of detail here you don't often see in open world games. The character models look great, and I really like the costume design, especially for the villains. They all have a distinct look unique to this version, but still retain what's iconic about them. There's even allusions to their classic costumes, so it's not like they've been redesigned, but more like their costumes and gear have evolved from what we're used to seeing.
This piece of the Shocker's original uniform showed me how to protect myself from his blasts. Of course, they always upgrade, don't they?
Just like Spidey's new costume. I'll be honest, when the game was announced I wasn't crazy about the White Spider, and the story explanation for it just feels like an excuse for it, kinda like the reasoning for Quiet being mostly naked in Metal Gear Solid 5. But I have to say, the new look has grown on me. But the characters aren't the only thing that looks great in the game. The city looks absolutely spectacular from the street to the sky, and it really captures the bustling nature of New York with tons of traffic and pedestrians everywhere. And they're not just for show, you can actually go down and high-five people and shake hands and say hello.
Isn't the city great?
The game sounds just as good as it looks. I never got tired of hearing Spidey's web on the buildings or hearing the sounds of the city drowning it out as I dive towards the pavement and then slingshot back up. This is all accompanied by a fantastic score by John Paisano.
Spider-Man. It's catchy.
Villains' themes are appropriately menacing, and I always loved hearing Spidey's theme kick in anytime I did something badass. The score even changes dynamically as you play, kicking into gear when you go from crouching on a perch to web slinging. There are a few presentational issues though. Dialogue would sometimes cut off on me, which in a game with such a good story that I got seriously invested in is absolutely infuriating. I'm almost certain I missed an entire phone conversation with Peter's landlord. It made me wish the game had a transcript so I'd go back and check. I also noticed that the windows in the buildings don't reflect what's around them, which, fair play to Insomniac, took me a long time to spot. Although these issues feel like nitpicks given the overall quality of the presentation. Now, a big beautiful city isn't worth much if there's nothing to do. Luckily, there's plenty to keep Spidey busy. Outside of the main story and side missions, you have challenge maps to tackle, random crimes to stop, backpacks to collect, and Oscorp research stations to manage for Harry Osborn. The backpacks are, in my opinion, the best collectible in any game ever. Each one has either a fun reference or something that adds to the backstory and really fleshes out the lore. The research stations are definitely the weakest part of the game. They're not really fun, they kind of just feel like busy work, and some of the setups for them are a bit ridiculous, but the last one does add some really cool weather effects. Lastly, the game has probably the best photo mode I've ever seen. There's tons of filters and stickers you can use, and you can even make your pics look like a comic book cover or a Daily Bugle front page. It's so good that I actually kept interrupting boss fights just to take pictures. I platinumed the game 3 days ago and I'm still jumping in just to take pics and swing around the city. All in all, Spider-Man is an expertly crafted game, one that delivers the definitive Spider-Man experience. Not only does it rank among the best superhero games ever made, but easily cements itself among the best of Sony's first party lineup, which, given some of Sony's recent efforts, is really saying something. So that's my review. I've been wanting to start this channel for a while, and considering how much I love talking about this game, I felt like now was the perfect opportunity. Given that the two biggest focal points of my nerdiness are Marvel and PlayStation, it's been kind of surreal seeing Spidey standing next to Kratos, Aloy, and Nathan Drake as a PlayStation icon. I wanted to keep this video spoiler free for the people who haven't played or finished the game yet, so I definitely have more to say on the story and where it seems the next game is going to go. I'll be covering these topics next, so if you enjoyed this and you want to see more, feel free to subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time.